it actually cost more to run the COP this year than it would for the run out. Professor Salter's
Yeah.
marine cloud brightening. He actually has
That's a
prototyped.
brilliant stat. I love that.
I mean, we've kind of hoped that, as climate gets more in your face and as it threatens food supplies, et cetera, that we actually can do a logical thing like, deploy marine cloud brightening, for example. And, if Peter's calculations are correct, it doesn't take that much time. I mean, he's talking about cooling the surface of the ocean in 20 years, right? If those calculations are even close, that's a very short period of time. And sure, we would see glaciers regrowing, and we'd see Arctic sea ice thickening, and so on. If that, of course, if that's correct, but I mean, I had a question for you, Steve, and myself. I'm not sure how much you've looked at things like ocean pasture restoration, for example, because if you're spraying seawater through nozzles, iron is a key micronutrient, right? So I know the nozzles are quite small, but if you add substances in the water stream that you're spraying that, for example, contain micronutrients, you might sort of get more bang for the buck, so to speak, right? So it's worthwhile looking at, say, piggybacking, some other ideas onto your spray systems. Like, have you ever looked at that? Is that even possible?
Yes. Well, I've looked. I'm particularly interested in iron, and I have got a different design for a different kind of ship that has got a very large surface area of the outside, bigger than the area of the hull you normally expect from a ship, which is made of angle iron. And you probably heard of cathodic protection, which is used to stop oil platforms from corroding. And if you reverse the voltages that you will now use for cathodic protection to make anodic accelerated corrosion, you can make this go off into the sea as ions. And this gives you a very nice way of choosing where and when and how much you want to increase the iron in the deep oceans, particularly the southern oceans. Now, there were a whole bunch of experiments where people were hoping that they could increase fish supplies by providing more iron, and only one of them worked. But it was done by a chap called Smetacek, and I think they weren't really measuring the effects of iron in the ocean. I think they were really measuring how good people were at keeping track of which bit of ocean that they treated. And they all did it in a very short time. I think the longest was 40 days of observation. And they put in really rather large doses, and then didn't get to the measurements done in the right place. So what I'd like to do is to try something with a much lower dose over a much wider area and a much longer time, long enough for the migration of the different species, and maybe even a bit of evolution of them. And I think we could get the iron in a large part of the very desert oceans, which really hardly got any, to up to the level of good places. And this doesn't need a very large number of ships. I can send you the design of the ship. It's also driven by Flettner rotors, but it's got a catamaran structure, and the hull is really a Y section, so that you're getting 6 different faces being corroded at the same time. I haven't been in touch. I've been in touch with Russ George and Victor Smetacek as well, and nobody has pointed out any insuperable problems with this. So we could restore the iron quite easily.
How accelerated is the corrosion? I mean, you said that you apply
it depends on the current.
Right.
You get it's 10 to the 5 coulombs of a charge will give you a gram molecule of iron, which is what, 55 grams, I think, of iron. So it's quite a small. It's a big current, but it's a very low voltage. And I think we're talking about 40 kilowatts of electricity per vote.
So would you envision iron plates attached to the hull that you basically apply the voltage to, the current to, and then they corrode very quickly? Next time the ship's in port, you get new iron plates on it, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
At the moment, it's about 3 months for a trip. So you go out. It might maybe take you 2 weeks to get to where you want to do it, and then you have 3 months of. Then you have to come back and load up more iron. I'm talking about 700 tons of iron per ship.
Right. Is there any way you can find an old wreck, in shallow water, and put current through it so that it corrodes extremely quickly and produces loads of iron for, say, a fishing, a continental shelf fishing bank?
The continental shelves of shallow water are already okay on, and especially if there's a river nearby. The rivers are bringing down.
True.
The place you want to do it is where it's pretty deep and where there isn't an upwelling, and so you do want to get out to sea. And certainly, oil rigs and wrecks help fish. There's more fish around a wreck. I'd rather do it somewhere where it's mobile and I can choose to do it in a different place, and I've got control over that.
Right, and you want to deploy it where you've got high nutrient, low iron region. So iron is the definite limiting ingredient to phytoplankton growth.
It isn't always, but it usually is. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
I would just like to emphasize again, as we're trying to get this message across to the layperson, that there are a lot of complex issues, and I would also like to emphasize that I'm under no illusions, nor are any of us here, that there's any one magic bullet that's going to fix any of our problems. It's going to take a set of complicated solutions to fix a set of complicated problems, obviously. And I'm under no illusions either. I know myself, sure, we could all be flogging a dead politician at this stage, no. But I mean, we just don't know at this stage, what the situation is for us at the moment. And we're even talking here now about actual, as non-invasive as possible methods of actually trying to help or do something. And I would emphasize again on the quote that John had said himself. He spoke about some of the small things that we would do. We say, like, such in relation to such events as a wet bulb scenario, and what would we do for our elderly? And John had it was a very touching thing that he said about how we should actually think about taking care of our elderly in the event of a wet bulb scenario. And for the average person out there on the street, they're not even aware of what a wet bulb scenario is, or how likely an event like that is possible in our own countries, even in a country like Ireland. And the simple message to people that I'm getting across is that from this conversation alone, I'm sure you can grasp that we're facing something that something is coming down the line that we have to face up to. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to come, as John said himself, that we're going to come out the other end of this at the end of the day. But as John also said, if we do wheel, the elderly out from the old folks' homes because there's no air conditioning there, and bring them off to the supermarkets and open the fridges to hold their hands while they pass away, and in a wet bulb scenario, which is something that we're actually facing, let alone the loss of food crops and everything else. These are things we have to face up to. But what John also said, because we have to try something. We can't just look, we have to try something, but we can't be attached to the outcome. That is the message. We need to face up to our responsibilities and either realize, or either way, we're either going to realize that we're not the most intelligent species in the world because we couldn't even cooperate to actually save our asses, or we're going to realize, we actually are a fairly intelligent species. We've fucked it up so far, but we actually might have a chance of doing some good and reversing it, or at the very least extending our time, whichever the case may be. I don't know. But what I do know is, until we face it, we can't do anything about it. And as John says, we have to try something. And I know John is not so in favour of different types of geoengineering, because there are very, very many types of geoengineering that have been put up on the table. And we all know that some of them are not very, very, safe for the environment, such as stratospheric aerosol injection or something. We have no control over something that goes up there in the stratosphere. It's up there for years. It's going to do whatever it does. And a lot of people who have problems with it, because that's the main thing to think about when they hear about geoengineering, is stratospheric injection.
I can give you a good example. I mean, Stephen would be well aware of this. I mean, the motto of most engineers is that the cause of most problems are previous solutions. So the silting up of the Nile Delta was, well, we solved the problem of kind of the irregularity of the irrigation. So let's build some dams. Oh shit, what have we done now? So it's always this issue of the phenomenally complex system. And one of the things that I love about the work of Sailesh and Jamin, who I understand work together, is the notion of trying to take us to a place where we can all do our piece, but we can all somehow be doing the same thing at the same time. Now this is I have no way of understanding how this mechanism might work, but I'm sitting here talking to a wonderful group of people, so maybe this is part of the mechanism. To give you an example of the law of unintended consequences, roughly 10 years ago, 12 years ago, myself and a good friend had this realization that we needed to dramatically reduce power consumption in houses. So we needed to get people purchasing, much lower energy white goods for their homes, like A++ or whatever. Now, an extraordinary thing was that the most powerful piece of energy efficiency legislation that there is in the European Union is the silly A to G label. People go into a shop, they see the label, and they sort of say, "Well, what does A++ mean?" Well, it's 50 euros dearer, but you're saving the planet. And they say, "Oh, screw it, I'll buy it." So that was by far the most important piece of legislation. Still is, in terms of affecting consumer behavior. Now, at the time, we suddenly had the internet about 12 to 15 years ago, and people started going around with smartphones, and there was no way of putting the labels on the internet. How do you put labeling on the internet? And myself and a couple of friends quite ingeniously found a wonderful way of doing it, identifying information, we slightly redesigned the label so you rolled over the energy class and the label popped up. Brilliant chap called Colin Joyce was the chap who had the fundamental idea. So what we managed to do was get 11 pieces of legislation passed that said that when you go online, the label has to be presented in the following way. And it was remarkably successful. Oh, wonderful. Apparently we improved the efficiency of the original labeling directives by 30% in the assessment done. Oh, John Doyle, savior of the planet. But look at the reality. I was let do that because I was a useful idiot. Who makes all the low energy ones? Europeans do. Who built the cheap ones and stacked them high? The Chinese or whatever, and we import them from them. Second of all, it is a law of fundamental Darwinianism that any energy that is saved in an energy efficient fashion is used to grow or to expand the overall energy use. That's why you find animals will kind of reduce a certain amount of brain power or muscle power, and then they'll swarm together and there'll be more of them. So what actually happened was that my wonderful legislative initiative where I thought I'd save the planet resulted in, and I can measure this, a dramatic increase in the amount of energy being used in homes. Congratulations, John. Nice one. So the point there is somehow you have to set the boundary conditions. It would have worked beautifully if electricity were rationed. Try using the or word anywhere in a free market economy. Give people a little, one of those old meters you used to feed with 50 pence pieces. Sorry, I'm really showing my age now. And sort of say you've got 3 of those for the week. You've got one screen in the house, and what sort of appliance would you like? That changes what happens. But simply increasing energy efficiency dramatically increases end energy use. And once again, my fear with the sort of we have an ingenious technical solution. Well, people are sort of saying, "This is brilliant. These guys have made more fish in this place. Let's rip out some more fish. We can afford to grow in some other way." So the beauty of the kind of the sort of shimmering mirage of I won't quite use the H for hope word that Sailesh and Jamin put before us is, wow, what would it be like if we gave everyone in the world a meal? That almost reduced me to tears when he said it. Now, that on its own isn't enough. What would it be like if we could persuade the farmers in that wonderful, rich farming county down in Cork that, do you know what, lads, it's not beef anymore. We're going to have to do something else. How do you bring that along? How does that happen? And I have no real access to it, because that's as much a socio-spiritual as a socio-economic problem. How does that happen where people sort of say, yeah, we could do this. We could lead it. We won't just follow and see. Wow, Ireland, there's only, 4.5, 5 million people. Do you know what? We could completely transform this place. And that's, I know that's what we're probably all searching for. Certainly James and James, I can say so, but getting there, I don't know. And I mean, my hope and my genuine feeling is this was maybe a contribution to that.
Yeah. Thanks, John. And yes, as I said, I know myself we could be flogging a dead politician here, and it's as simple as that. But the fact is, again, I will always reiterate, we have to try. We have to try something. No, we don't try something that's reckless, of course. And another thing that's actually, I know that Paul mentioned a few political issues, but there's another issue that I saw a news article only recently, a couple of weeks ago, that 60 scientists have now signed a petition to ban all types of geoengineering. Now, this was a WeOn News article that was out. Now, they basically demonstrated geoengineering then as aerosol stratospheric injection. There's a great analysis. In other words, there's powers at play at the moment, already thinking about how can we stop these different types of geoengineering has even been put on the table. So they're going to basically, for lack of a better word, prohibition on all of them. And bear with me here now, a little slight analogy, I suppose, but what I'm saying is that Sailesh makes a great point as well of throwing out the baby with the bathwater. And we all know that in prohibition, in relation, we say, just for the average person to understand what I'm talking about, we say the prohibition of drugs. Now, we all know that there's a lot of nasty drugs out there. As a matter of fact, we're being prescribed a lot of nasty drugs by our own doctors legally. But, they're there. And there's a lot of them that are there's prohibition about. But there is also now a lot of recent study over the years of cannabis and the benefits of cannabis. Unfortunately, it has been labelled with the rest of the drugs and therefore illegal. Now, funny enough, we have someone here in the room that is responsible in essence for the decriminalization of drugs in the United States and the rest of the world. And he's going to actually explain to us how he went about that. And when he does give us a little talk about it, I would like to say that we have to bear in mind the prohibition of cannabis being the baby thrown out with the bathwater. We have to look on marine cloud brightening as being the cannabis of solar radiation management or geoengineering in a sense, because there is an ongoing effort now to throw or prohibit all types of geoengineering. And I want to make sure that people understand that this is available to us to try. And as you say, John, we must try. We are facing, after all, a dartboard, as you say, with 15 numbers on it. Throw a dart and it could be any one of those numbers. It could be September. It could be any one of those numbers. But you don't believe it's going to be any further than 15 years, and there'll be no human.
I would have to be brutally frank and say that for me, I would not try geoengineering before I'd made the effort to help people see that giving the planet back to the planet and changing the way we eat, as suggested by Sailesh and Jamin, and as adopted by me, a meat-eating Irish savage from Dublin. The trouble is, this is a solution which will beg an even bigger problem. Now,
I must object to this.
Yeah.
Putting the sea surface temperatures back to where they used to be is going to be better than worse. What you're doing is stopping research. You should actually allow the research and then decide whether or not to use it. If you say you're not allowed to do research, then
100% agree.
100%
agree that, of course, the research should be done. Yes,
yeah.
100% agree.
You can stop this in the one click of a mouse, and a few days later, it's all forgotten and finished.
Yeah, I would also like to say that one of the main reasons I'm also attracted to marine cloud brightening is because of the fact that it's using natural methods of using salt nucleus as a way of forming the raindrops. Also, the fact that it's wind and wave powered, operated, and autonomous, and also the fact that it's actually within our it actually costs more to run the COP this year than it would for the run of Professor Salter's marine cloud brightening. He actually has prototypes.
That's a brilliant stat. I love that.
He actually has prototypes designed and ready to be fit into containers to be shipped out to some island on the Pacific to do the further 4-month testing that he needs to do in order to confirm everything else to have these ships built. What we need then is consensus around the actual idea of putting them into use. But I agree with what you're saying, John.
You see my problem. Like we managed to keep the heat off for a little bit. So we keep the heat off. What does everyone do? They carry on as before. The pH of the oceans continue dropping like a stone. We kill the oceans off. Okay, without a radical and fundamental change in the way we behave as humans, maybe this might buy us some time. I mean, like I say, there's no doubt if I was sitting under a heat bomb at the moment and I turned on the air conditioning, it would save my ass for a while. No, I'm not saying that, but it's the question of this is the invitation to take over, as Sailesh said, take over the management of the climate. Yes, fantastic. Okay, do we have the wisdom to do that? Not sure. What should the approach be? In my case, I would think one of modesty and retreat. I understand that what Stephen is proposing is one of being more proactive and technological. Okay, fair enough. I'm attracted to that myself, being an engineer. But much of what I feel is that it's a question of stopping doing things, not doing more things. But I bow to the man's expertise in the area.
Well, I agree with what you're saying in there, and that's just where it's leading me now into our next speaker here as well. But I would just reiterate that in the sense that we have to do something, and we have to try be benevolent and non-evasive in our methods as well. We have to have the conversation, in other words, but we have to face up to what's happening before we can have the conversation. Now, again, like I said, the idea of prohibition for marine cloud brightening is the baby being thrown out with the bathwater. I think that we have to have something, we have to try and prevent that from happening in the first place as well. And in relation to prohibition and the idea of prohibition of drugs, Jamin Shively here, our next guest, was very much instrumental in the the forcing of the Obama administration into legalizing cannabis in America. So I'll just leave it without further. I'd like to Jamin to maybe perhaps share a little of the press conference that you organised with President Vicente Fox of Mexico, and so that we can give us a little idea, and you could tell us the correlation yourself, as you see, but also give us a little breakdown as well on the work that we do here in relation to, as we said, John, we know there's no one magic bullet, so there are a vast amount of conversations needed to be had. And in order to facilitate those conversations, Jamin has been working on a number of years now on the idea of building the collective intelligence. And I don't mean artificial intelligence, I mean collective human intelligence, where we actually come together in conversation. And maybe just then the best of the ideas will float to the surface, and we at least can have some consensus on how to move forward. So without further ado,
I have to leave the room now. I admire what Jamin has done, and I have heard about it before. So, but good night, everybody.
No problem. Thank you very, very much, Professor Salter, for being here. Thank you very much.
It was an honor and a privilege. Thank you so much for you.
Without further ado, and after our little bio break, I think we'll let Jamin take it over and give us a little chat and give him a chance to speak.
I'm listening, man.
From Darth Vader.
From Darth Vader. Take it away, Jim.
Yeah, in fact, yes, I was Darth Vader at COP26. In fact, it was very memorable seeing Paul there, and I was singing, and then I started working Paul into the song. We hadn't met before, but of course, Paul, your reputation and fame precedes you. So we had a very colorful introduction there. And we performed for 10 days straight there at COP26 as Darth Vader. And it's Darth Vader, Inc. I'm the guy in the suit, but it's really James, Alan, James, the whole community here. And this actually gets to something you said that's very profound, John, which I completely agree with, which is that without a radical fundamental change in the way we behave as humans.
Yep, sorry. Yep,
that's okay. Then, who knows what's going to happen? And, we definitely face unintended consequences. There's no question about it. Precisely where I'm headed is precisely towards such a radical fundamental change in the way we behave. I'm also an engineer. I'm drawn to engineering solutions, but I'm also painfully aware of the unintended consequences, et cetera. So, for example, in the work I do in food with Dr. Sailesh Rao, our slogan is love all, feed all. And we're committed to feeding the world plant-based foods, making plant-based foods a basic human right, guaranteed for everyone. Some people have come to me and said, well, then you'll have even more population growth, which I believe is absolute nonsense, because the driver of population growth is precisely deprivation, including food insecurity, right? So we can debate these things all day long, but the bottom line is we need a complete, holistic, radical transformation. And as holistic as it is, it nonetheless consists of parts. And the most urgent parts that I see are, number one, feeding everyone plant-based foods, which will also accelerate the transition away from animal agriculture, which is unspeakably destructive, and cooling our planet. Fire departments are good, and we need a planetary fire department led by marine cloud brightening, in my humble opinion. So let's talk about, now what's interesting, you also mentioned, John, that, hey, listen, if we can't agree on much smaller things, how are we going to agree on something so big? Well, the way I think we're going to agree on something so big is the urgency of it, the urgency of cooling the planet and saving life on Earth. And speaking of urgency, it was urgency that forced the hand of the Obama administration to finally give the green light to legalization. So I'll share a bit of my personal history here. My great-grandfather, Diego Pellicer, a Spaniard, was the largest grower of hemp in the world during the Victorian era. He had, thousands upon thousands of acres of hemp cultivation in the Philippines. And he was supplying the Spanish Armada, the Spanish fleet, with hemp rope during the Spanish-American War. Based on his legacy, I went ahead and built the first brand of premium cannabis. But I was in the game much more for the overall holistic transformation of society and our liberation from prohibition and other forms of oppression than I was about the money. And so what I'm going to screen share now is a few minutes, about 5 minutes of a press conference that President Vicente Fox of Mexico and I co-organized at a time when he was retired from president. He'd been retired from president for a few years, but he was the first freely elected president of Mexico. And the parallels with what we need to do with marine cloud brightening are absolutely profound. As James pointed out, marine cloud brightening is the cannabis of geoengineering. There's a lot of bad drugs, metaphorically, within geoengineering. But let's not throw out all of geoengineering. There are some good ones, like cannabis, for example. Like marine cloud brightening, therefore, being the cannabis. So let's look at the parallels. What I'm going to show you are 5 minutes from a 1.5-hour press conference that I believe are the 5 minutes that forced the hand of President Barack Obama to finally say yes to legalization. Up until this point, 6 months had passed since the states of Washington and Colorado had passed legalizing at the state level, but we were still under the dark cloud of federal prohibition. So really nothing was getting done, right? Because we never knew when the federal government was going to shut us down and throw us all in prison. And so this press conference pivoted all that. I want us to imagine, as you watch this, imagine a similar press conference where we alert the world to the urgency of exponential planetary overheating, global warming, and its effects, and where it is very likely taking us, per your own colorful descriptions, John, and Paul, all of us. We need to share that with the world, the problem and the urgency. Number two, the urgency of the solution of the cannabis of geoengineering, marine cloud brightening, the most benevolent, and you can turn it off with a switch anytime you want. And you can also optimize it for optimizing for weather patterns. So for example, with the Indian dipole, you can simultaneously reduce flooding in East Africa and increase rainfall in Australia, thus mitigating the tragedies that have been going on there. So there are ways to tweak it and optimize it so that it is nothing but benevolent. Now, as far as the unintended consequences, well, now that the planet's cooled, great, we can keep on burning, we can keep on eating meat and all that. That will be addressed in, again, precisely what you mentioned as the more radical, fundamental transformation in the way we behave as humans, which I believe in all my heart that we can achieve by pursuing precisely this path of inviting the world into this conversation, rather than us up on high saying, we're the engineers and scientists who know best, and so we're imposing this. Instead, invite the world to a conversation. So let me share a few minutes of this press conference. James, let me know if the video is okay, because with Marco's feedback, I'm just supposed to do optimized sound. So anyway, let me know, James, how this looks. So this is end of May 2013. And again, I'll play 5 minutes of this in 2 segments. First, the introduction.
Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Before I introduce our distinguished guests, I would like to begin with a quote from the late astrophysicist Carl Sagan. "The illegality of cannabis is outrageous, an impediment to full utilization of a plant which helps produce the serenity and insight sensitivity, and fellowship so desperately needed in this increasingly mad and dangerous world. Carl Sagan. But by making cannabis illegal, we have instead turned it into a tool for violence, exploited by criminals and organized crime, spanning many countries. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a unique moment in history. The Berlin Wall of the prohibition of cannabis is weak, and it is crumbling as we speak. And just as happened in Berlin in 1989, the old guards who used to protect the wall of cannabis prohibition are laying down their weapons and walking away. What remains to be done is to safely and systematically dismantle the wall of prohibition and replace it with a system of laws, international agreements, regulations, and standards to ensure a prosperous and, above all else, safe cannabis industry. We are moving forward. The states of Washington and Colorado are leading the way. We have waited long enough for some sort of a green light from Washington, D.C., telling us that it is okay to proceed. In fact, the silence from our nation's capital has been deafening. We are moving forward with our plans to build a national and eventually international network of cannabis businesses spanning the production, processing, distribution, and retail of cannabis and cannabis-based products.
Okay, now I'm going to skip ahead to where I introduce President Vicente Fox. And so the first half of the forcing of the hand of the Obama administration, you heard when I said, hey, the silence has been deafening. Is it red light or green light? They were just silent, which is business as usual, right? Now comes the clincher with President Fox.
We'll discuss. Next, it is my pleasure and profound honor to introduce to you a man who has dedicated his life to transforming his country and our world into a more peaceful, loving, and prosperous planet. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you the first freely elected president of Mexico, Señor Presidente.
Congratulations for that position. This state of Washington, has decided to lead a new path, a path to change the paradigm by legalizing medical and social use of cannabis. In Mexico, we welcome this initiative because the cost of the war, in the case of Mexico, is becoming unbearable. Too high for Mexico, Latin America, and the rest of the world. The impact in the economy, on income, on tourism investment, loss of talent, and above all, loss of hope, and 80,000 kids dead in the last 6 years. All this because our neighbor to the north represents such a gigantic consumer market. We must get out of this trap. And here is the opportunity. Now this group here is moving accordingly from words into plans, and from plans into action, and the action in the arena. To play the real game, this group must understand the need to make good, safe, and legal use of these new laws.
Okay, and I'll the press conference goes for a full hour and a half, and we have a whole slew of experts, including Dr. Michael Osborne, the president of the Strang Institute of Cancer Research in New York City. They're the ones who developed the Pap smear. Talk about credibility. We had 3-star General Skip Drepp speaking of the rights of veterans for cannabis, for dealing with precisely their trauma and pain, et cetera. And the very next day, I mean, this was an international press conference. I'm just going to show here briefly. This is the front page of the Seattle Times the very next morning. Lead story: ex-Mexican president praises Shively's pot effort. And within the international accepted standard of 3 months, within that window, the Obama administration, through Attorney General Eric Holder, gave us the green light to proceed. So it was a huge victory, a political victory, and a victory in terms of transforming society. So I envision a similar effort that we can all engage in, all of us who've been in this meeting today. And we need probably a couple few other scientists. It's important to have a broad spectrum of perspective on this. That's what collective intelligence is, including political leadership that can speak to the pain of their people, whether it's Micronesia, Bangladesh, et cetera, just as President Vicente Fox spoke to the pain his people and his region are feeling because of inaction on prohibition. So all of this would be with a view to expanding this conversation to a vastly new level and eliminating the prohibition of one specific form of geoengineering. Right now, we're living under the shroud of effective prohibition, not legal prohibition, but effective prohibition of all forms of geoengineering, including the good ones, like marine cloud brightening, right? Like mirror reflection, like ICE 9/11, et cetera, right? And again, as to the radical and fundamental transformation in the way we behave as humans, I would propose that the singular ask of this press conference to the world is join the conversation. Join us in conversation through this very medium of Zoom. So imagine that you have, hundreds of thousands of people streaming in, half of whom are opposed, half of whom are in favor. And we organize those hundreds of thousands of people into a network of conversations on Zoom, totally achievable, right? Each Zoom room can have dozens of breakout rooms, and we can have, a constellation of, dozens of Zoom rooms themselves. So we can easily get into the thousands of conversations, network together, some focusing on engineering specifics, some focused on global modeling, some focused on the kinds of overall synthesis that Paul Beckwith is an expert at, providing us with the big picture and all the feedback loops and everything else, et cetera, with a view to humanity finally coming together in this hyper-connected, collectively intelligent way to both make sense of the problems, the opportunities, and ultimately, what are we going to do, right? Build towards consensus. We're talking about a revolution in the way humanity works, not through elected or unelected representatives, but essentially through a form of direct democracy and direct collective intelligence. So we're talking about simultaneously and holistically addressing our biggest problems, including the meta problem of our heretofore inability to work together, coordinate, collaborate, sense make, and ultimately make appropriate choices. Sailesh and I are organizing a press conference for April 16th of this year on the food issue. I would love for us to work together to create a press conference, even sooner than that, ideally, focused on marine cloud brightening. The problem of exponential planetary overheating, where we're headed, what is predictable in terms of loss of Arctic ice, methane release, et cetera, loss of habitat for humanity, including food production, et cetera, wildfires, droughts, sea level rise, the House of Horrors list goes on, and we all know it all too well. This, I believe, can be a game changer. So this sequence of press conferences focusing on cooling the planet and focusing on the food issue, which of course bifurcates into multiple different facets, ending hunger and malnutrition, transitioning to a plant-based diet, saving the biosphere, et cetera, this retreat from cattle grazing to returning land to nature, et cetera. Of course, these are but the biggest single solutions in, again, the holistic transformation that is so urgent. So much more to say on all these topics, but right now I'd really like to just pass the talking feather and see what questions, comments, feedback, et cetera. And thank you all so much for being here. It is such a pleasure and an honor to be with everyone today. Thank you. Passing the feather.
Maybe I'll go first, because I suspect Paul will be more in favor. So you would not expect me to do anything other than give you a hard time, because this is tough. For me, the tiny fraction of a chance that we have to survive as a species is based on retreat very, very quickly, into the stockade, eating lentils and beans. That's it. I disagree fundamentally and totally that we have the wisdom in any way, shape, or form to do something like geoengineer, climate engineer. It seems to me ludicrous. The proof is everywhere that we are utterly incapable of doing anything like that in a holistic sense. And I'll give you kind of my experience as a bureaucrat. So way back in 2005, 2006, I was picked to join this group called the Lisbon Task Force. I think I mentioned it early in the thing. And as I said, I discovered the sustainability thing and then started working really, really hard on this. So I was one of the people who was vaguely behind Al Gore coming to Brussels to launch his movie, but much more importantly, using the Sustainable Development Strategy, I set up a thing called the Corporate Leaders Group. And this Corporate Leaders Group were a bunch of the 20th biggest emitters and industries in Europe, all sorts of weird people, Air France, Shell, all sorts of people. Got a guy called John Schellenhuber, the famous John Schellenhuber, as our chief scientist, a wonderful lady called Margot Wallström, who was our environment commissioner at the time. And what we pushed for was the famous European 20-20-20 targets. So sometime, I can't remember the year, 2005, 2006, these got adopted. The European Commission, the European Union committed to reducing emissions by 20%, increasing efficiency by 20%, and 20-20-20, whatever, I can't remember what the other 20 was. And I remember at the end of the meeting, John Schellen, so I was in one room with this group that I had set up, with Schellenhuber and these CEOs from all these huge companies. And in the other room, there was who was our the Portuguese president of the commission, I can't remember his name now, and all the heads of heads of state deciding on these 2020 targets, with Business Europe desperately opposing it and sort of saying this can't work, we'll fall out of, we won't be competitive and we can't do this. But this, as I say, we're looking 20 years ago, yeah. Anyway, it was agreed. I remember Schellenhuber, myself, and other people hugging and saying, "Fuck, we've made a difference. This is unbelievable. We've actually got legal targets. This is out of this world." I remember going back to my office. So I'm going back to my office and I get out of this because my office, at that stage, I had left the Sec General. to be perfectly frank, I've been thrown out of the SecGen for this sort of radicalism. And so I was back at my home DG, and I'm walking down the street, and I meet a deputy Director-General who shall remain nameless. He was at the time a deputy Director-General, and we really didn't like each other. And the guy, and I'm walking down the street, and I said, "We've done it. We have to, within 15 years, emissions have to be down 20%, fossil fuel usage down 20%, and energy efficiency increased by 20%. This is unbelievable. And that puts us on the trajectory. We're doing this." And there was a huge big announcement. Look it up, 2020 targets, European Commission. It was heaven, yes. And he stopped in the middle of the street and said, "Doyle," he said, "another bunch of targets the European Union will never meet." And he walked up the hill away from me, from his office. And I stood in the street, rooted to the spot for about, I don't know, it seemed like an eternity. It was probably 30 seconds, but it seemed like an eternity. And the thought went through my head, son of a bitch, but he is right. And of course, since then, we completely, the usual, the Europeans lead the world in telling people we lead the world in reducing emissions. You know, we lead the world in telling folks, right? So we, since the, you shift the baselines, you offshore all your heavy stuff to the Chinese and sort of say, the car, yeah, I know it took 20 tons of carbon to make it, but that's the Chinese problem, but we're important. What? So every trick known to man do we use. I sometimes think poor Americans are just stupid. Do you know what I mean? They should actually look at the European Union, look at the way we actually count things and say, what the fuck?
Yeah.
You guys are hypocrites. Yeah, we invented it. We're really good at the hypocrisy crap. So from my point of view, what you're doing is you found another hobby horse. Go for it. Have fun with it, but I won't be with you on this one, right? Because I've been in enough of these hobby horses. I gotta go where my heart brings me, right? And you know, I hope I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I can very easily predict where this goes. Few shipping over, so oh great, and lots of announcements. Oh, look, we got ships going around the world. Then there'll be a row about this ship, but it didn't work the way we thought. It doesn't work here. Oh, they're only doing. If you even get that far, and that's fine, because in my own way, what I need to do is go to the bit that you say, and of course, you know, this will lead to the transformation of humanity. It will in your ass. No, it won't. The transformation of humanity leads to the transformation of humanity. And if there is no path, nor is there any achievement, as the wonderful, I can't remember his name. We're here now, and I got to stay in my space and do the right thing. This feels all wrong for me. Having said that, one of the things I'm involved with was another bunch of engineers. We're trying to get electrolyzers co-located with absolutely every windmill, and we want to take over the existing natural gas pipelines that are all over Europe and use that to store the hydrogen, which we can do for almost no cost. We're working really hard on getting something like this done, and that solves your problems of storage for renewables. You take the German network on its own. If that's full of gas, you've got 6 months storage of clean hydrogen. But can anyone really buy into it? Everyone understands what we're doing. Everyone knows this is the way we would have to go to make some sort of energy transition. I've been up and down every conceivable energy commissioners and all these hugely important people. And another thing that's interesting to me is your contacts. I have been connected, and I mean really connected, at really, really high levels for years. I have never come across more powerless people. They are there precisely because they're powerless, precisely because they keep the machine ticking over. So the point, there's something in what the other guys were talking about in this kind of, it's something outside of the system. And I'm not saying I have the answer. I definitely don't, but I have to go with my heart. And just as my heart wasn't with Lei Tao and his ideas on mere reflection, it's fine. Do it. Who knows? Yeah. Maybe in the doing, people sort of say, these guys are right, something's happening here. And then the other stuff begins to happen. Go for it. I mean, this is what I'm trying to do for local energy systems. one windmill, one electrolyzer, your own hydrogen. Let's see how this works for a small community of 200 people. I'm trying to do this in our, I have to talk about James about this. Go for what you think might work, but don't lose sight of the fact that the totality is not the aggregate of all the small efforts. The totality is the totality. You lose sight of that, you surrender to your neocortex. There's also your heart and there's also your lizard. And my heart and lizard don't buy this one, but good luck.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. It's we've hit the 2.5 hour mark, and I actually have another Zoom call by a Canadian climate activist on Canada's policy specifically. So
yeah,
it's to do with the Canadian Club of Rome. So
oh, fantastic.
So anyway, thank you, everybody, for great.
Did you not get to react to what Jamin said? I mean, I bet you like it. You'd be more up for it than me, right?
Yeah. Well, it's just I do have to go. It's 2.5 hours.
Okay.
Okay. So next time I will. Yeah. Okay. Thanks everybody.
Thank
you. You're brilliant. I'm so happy to have met you at last.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
We drink together the next time.
Okay, goodbye.
Thanks very much, Paul.
Yeah.
Well, let's carry on so I'm happy to carry on. We're still recording. I think this is a brilliant conversation. Yep. I love your pushback, John. Let me propose one thing. So would you have as much pushback on our program to feed everyone plant-based foods, starting right here in Los Angeles? The reason we're starting here in Los Angeles, and we've got quite a network here of vegan activists who were rallying to the cause and great leadership emerging, is different from Las Vegas, where what happens in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas. Los Angeles is the opposite. What happens in Los Angeles does not.
Shit goes everywhere, man.
It goes everywhere. So we're starting this revolution of feeding everyone plant-based foods in Los Angeles for free, making food, nutritious food, a basic human right. Our belief is that this is the best way to start a more radical, deeper transformation where we make all basic human needs basic human rights. So food is the first domino, followed by shelter, health.
Okay, it was a simple question. Would I be against it? Yes and no. So you look at the real dietary habits of almost any native peoples anywhere, and you realize it was always plant-based. Okay, you use a little bit of protein somewhere, but as a condiment. You know, you look at the Okinawa diet. Oh, they eat fish. No, they didn't eat fish. They ate rice and they ate noodles, and there was a tiny little bit of fish to flavor. Oh, the Mediterranean diet, it's loads of processed olive oil and fish. And no, it isn't. It's pasta and tomatoes and maybe a little bit of, So no matter where you go, the Vietnamese diet, the Chinese diet. So again, what I find is, it's almost one step further than reinventing the wheel. The wheel isn't there. Oh, thank God I'm here to provide these people with the wheel. The wheel is there. It's Ramana Maharshi I was thinking of, who sort of says, there is no path and there is no achievement. It's here. Now, how do you get people to see it's here? That's a tricky one. But I'm unsure that I've got a new one. I have this brilliant idea. Like I said, I've spent since 2004, spending my time with brilliant ideas and ingenious new solutions. I know for a fact that I have done measurably, quantitatively, far more harm than good. Even the achievement of explicitly, for example, the achievement of the Energy Labeling Directive, which resulted precisely in selling more machines, which is precisely what everybody wanted. Useful idiots served a useful idiot's function. Nice one, John. But that's not a bad thing if I can share that learning now. And what I'm missing is the notion of of a humility of, I really don't know. Like I say, I see people all the time sort of saying, "Wow, so we rewild west of the Shannon, and we know exactly what we should put there." You don't know what to put there. Wow. How do we get that sort of wisdom back again, where we understand that we're humble and small and a small part of this earth, never mind of the whole natural system. And this is what I'm kind of missing. There's this feeling, and I'm very like that myself. You know, I was born in 1960, Irish male. Fucking, you know, I mean, my therapist is busy. Yeah, and she works for her money. I'm telling you. But so yeah, I think I can fucking solve everything. Big now. And this is, you know, you go back to your famous triune brain notion, right? Here's our brain stem, and here's our limbic system, and here's the fold over, you know, of your neocortex. This fucking thing thinks it's in charge. It's not. It's the bit like having a computer, and you turn it on you buy a computer and you turn it on and you boot that stupid application, which is the calculator, and it fills your entire screen. And you do a few calculations. Oh, that's neat. That's neat. And then, okay, computers aren't all they're cracked up to be, really. You forget that what the computer, that the calculating part, this neocortex is one tiny part of what you are as a living, breathing being. What's behind it? What's it connected to? Oh, the internet. What the fuck is that? You have to close that fucking calculator application to turn on the internet and connect to people. And wow, how cool is this? Now, this is somatic. This is almost felt, you know, and something I'm really working through right now at the moment, what I feel. And like, there's an engineering side of me that I say loves these kind of solutions, and I can't resist working on the energy stuff with my mates. But there's my heart and my lizard telling me, careful here.
Well, John, I first, in response
what the fuck am I talking about? Could somebody tell me what I'm talking about?
You're making perfect sense to me anyway, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh God.
And what I'm saying is, I want to thank you for being here and being so honest in your answers as well, because I mean, that was one of my main reasons to ask you here as a guest, is because your honesty in your answers, and you're not afraid you're not going to bullshit people, basically, is what I'm saying. You've already done your job by even attending this meeting here today, because the purpose of the meeting was, after all, to let people know the severity of the situation and to try and learn to face up to it and deal with it.
And this part is important. The bit where we're two nice guys. Well, I know I'm nice. I'm not sure about Jamin, but we're two nice guys fucking disagree about shit. And you know, we're trying to work the problem here. You know, it's not, oh, we have this, we have it. No, we don't. You know, and we know a lot about this shit, and we're fucking clueless. You know, what do we do? Help. You know, so sorry that you'll get that out there. Don't be afraid.
No
anything I've said, put it out there. And I know Jamin's not insulted by anything I said, and I'm not insulted by anything he said, and we will go at this forever. And there's got to be a gap between the anode and the cathode, and then that's where the spark happens. There's got to be a gap. That's what we're here for. And you got to be vulnerable enough, and I admire his courage just sitting there. I think I made a couple of really good points about dimethyl sulfides and what would happen to the ocean, and the decreasing pH of the oceans, even if you do the cloud brightening. And I didn't really get any answer there. So I mean, I admire your courage and sticking around and talking to me. Because I'm techie. I like this shit. I know exactly how clouds form. I know exactly the size of, well, I don't know exactly, but you know what I mean.
Well, that's been, irregardless, the main part was to get the average person to be able to understand these things anyway, and to understand that basically the situation we're in, when we're the situation we find ourselves in. And I think,
in that case, I think the video should be called "The Neck of Us," and it should be I know the clip I'd start with.
Well, I still would say that in spirit of what you were saying, we have to try something, and regardless, in order to do that, we have to face up to things, and then we have to have conversations. So I mean, that is what the block party is all about, and I'd like Jamin to talk just a little bit more about that, because it's not just, it's not that we're here and we're who do we think we are? We're going to save the world. We're very aware of the struggle that it's going to take, and none of it's going to take place without conversation.
I mean, if you had done nothing more than than help that man do what he's doing, you know, man, you've nailed it. Because that his whole there's something about that just affects me deeply.
Yeah, well, I mean, in fairness, that is one of the main things we wanted to get across as well, is because Jamin has been involved with Sailesh now for many years and involved in this. I'll let Jamin talk to you about that, and because he knows Sailesh now so well, they're great friends. Like.
Yeah. In fact, Sailesh was just here in Los Angeles. I'm visiting Los Angeles. I live on an island off the coast of the state of Washington. And came down here to be here for 3 weeks to give this a real big push. Sailesh came as well. Yeah. We did a press conference last week. We did a big feeding session on Saturday at a big public park where we fed everybody. And
God, I'd love to have been at that.
Oh my goodness! Fantastic. Come anytime you want, John. We would love to have you here because again, Los Angeles is the epicenter. But the whole reason I went vegan and got involved with Sailesh doing all this is because we had some meetings on Zoom and we're going back and forth and back and forth. And so I really believe in the power of conversation.
Agreed.
And so every Friday, Saturday, James and I and a number of other colleagues host a 24-hour block party. But it's not just any block party, it's a collective intelligence block party. Where we cut. And the thing is, because if you don't put in the time and really go deep, you get what you were referring to earlier of just, some compressed sound bites, right?
Yeah.
Let's all come and be impressive for 5 minutes, showing some slides and some sound bites that we regurgitate over and over and over, and nothing original is said, right?
Yeah.
So we go deep into it, and we absolutely welcome all of the kinds of pushback that you're masterful at, which is absolutely essential.
I love what you're saying about the cowspiracy one, because that it's funny because I was thinking of it when James' daughter came. We were down in Spain. My in-laws live down in Spain. Well, my wife's sister is married to an English guy, and they bought a little house down in Spain after many years. So, and we kind of went in on it together. So we used to drive down. It was a holiday home because we'd 4 kids. They'd no kids, but they're older than us. They're already retired there. We were down there one Christmas, and my daughter, who works for an NGO in Honduras, she was home, and she said, anyone hear of cowspiracy? And I thought I was the world's leading climate expert there. And I think this is one of the things that the problem for me is very often not exchanging, but understanding how you've been lying to yourself. So this was really interesting. I said, we have to watch this cowspiracy stuff. And I watched it, and I was kind of, what the fuck? And everything made sense to me. I says, Dad, did you know about this? And I said, well, the sort of taxonomy we use currently in the Commission is climate change is sort of 1/3 housing, 1/3 industry, and 1/3 land use change. I never asked myself what the fuck land use change was. I vaguely thought, I suppose it's cities in Brazil getting bigger. And this is maybe only 10 years ago. And I'm going around lecturing to people about what needs to be done. And I'd never even said, what the fuck is land use change? And you turn around and you go, what? 51+% is due to, and then I did all these calculations afterwards, got hugely into the animal stuff and worked quite a bit with the UN and other, which is why I think I might be able to introduce you to some interesting people. But how did I manage to be a climate activist and a climate pain in the ass to, for so long without asking myself the simple question, what's land use change? I mean, it's extraordinary how obtuse intelligent people can be, which is why I kind of try and throw this cortex off and try and, try and feel it a bit more. Yeah.
Well, there we go. So, I mean, we do this every Friday night as well. Jamin would remind you of the exact time there now, Pacific time. But you're welcome, most welcome to join us any Friday for that anyway as well. But I
look forward to it, man.
Definitely be getting in touch with you in the hopes of organising another conversation in the future. Perhaps one
anytime.
Perhaps one on the humorous side with Darth Vader, if you were up for it.
I've got a great Darth Vader story, but I'll tell it to you next time. I too have dressed up as Darth Vader in commission meetings. Yes, you'll like this one.
Inside man in the EU, Jamin.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
My brother from the dark side. Love it.
You don't know
Excellent.
the power of the dark side.
Sorry. Briefly inhabited by my shadow. Gentlemen, it's been an absolute blast. Thank you so much.
Yes, it has been a pleasure, John.